Hello all, welcome to this session on governance, presented by Nalisha and Kerrie. Okay, Nalisha, over to you, maybe you can start.
Okay, hi everybody, welcome to today's session where we're going to talk about governance, we're going to talk about controls, and we're going to try and draw some parallels about how this ties into a project environment, as well as how it ties into a general business context. I'll give a brief intro just about myself, and then my colleague Kerrie will do the same. So my name is Nalisha Vadachalam, and a little bit about my background. My professional career has basically spanned across business management, IT business management that is, and procurement and supply chain across all industries, as well as risk governance and compliance, primarily with a focus from procurement and supply chain. I've worked across power generation, transmission, and distribution, so a lot of time in the utility sector, and a little bit of time in the services industry as well. I'm really happy to be here today and to share with you a little bit about my passion for risk governance and compliance. I believe these areas are really the heartbeat of an organization. It really sets the tone and drives and shapes the decisions that are made, the way people behave. Unfortunately, I think the area is very misunderstood at times, and this contributes to a lot of lack of interpretation of what to do, a lot of non-compliance issues, and generally some reckless business behavior. So we invite you to participate with us today. I think there's a Q&A function on Zoom or a chat function where you can pop in your questions. But more than that, we also invite you to talk and share any knowledge bits or any other questions and relevant information that you feel will benefit us all. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Kerrie. Welcome back to people that have attended previous sessions. So I'll be looking more specifically at your project and program governance and how that dovetails back into the corporate level governance. So Nalisha is going to be starting off, and then we'll kick into the project side. So we're keeping the slide deck nice and short to open up for the questions themselves. So whenever you feel that you have a question to ask, please do use the chat box, and we will actually have some open floor questions as well. Hope you enjoy this evening, or I should say this evening over here, because we happen to be in Australia. You've got a full Aussie hosting group tonight, and welcome from around the world wherever you happen to be. So if I get this right,
while Kerrie is setting up, we want to start off just by hearing if one or two of you would like to share, what do you think when you hear the words governance? What does it mean to you? Or what does it resonate? What emotions does it bring out in you? A lot of people we talk to, governance doesn't really have anything, any good reputation. It's always seen as a burden. It's always seen as a time waster. It's not well understood. Grown, yeah, that's a good word.
So Duran has said documentation. Duran, put your microphone on and let us know what you think.
Steps, processes are okay. It's okay if you don't have a mic, not a problem. But it looks like, you know, I don't see any good sentiments coming across here. And that's like a general public perception. It's not a nice one, because governance is a lot more than that. And it's really important. Hopefully we can talk about some of those things as we progress today. Do you want to go on, Kerrie?
Yep, just changing that slide over for you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, just want to minimize this so I have a better view. Okay, great. So don't focus too much on all of the whatever's in front of you. I'm going to talk through it, so you can just listen to me for now. When looking at governance, let's start off with the definition of governance. Governance, according to Merriam-Webster Dictionary, is the act of overseeing the control and direction of something. That something could be anything. Could be a country, it could be a company, it could be a business process, it could be anything that needs control or direction. So the important takeaway there is about control and direction. And control and direction to what? Towards success, of course. Success, I use it very loosely in this right here, because success could mean anything. It could mean success towards achieving your business objectives. It could mean success towards running a project according to its defined project methodology. It could mean success according to executing a contract in line with the scope of work. So it's important about saying all the different rules, all the different structures, all the different processes that need to be in place to help you achieve success in one or more of these somethings. The three elements that I think about when I try to define governance is business rules being number one. So business rules tell you and should define for an organization what is considered appropriate and what's considered inappropriate behavior or decisions. And these are not just rules that you need to follow. They're actually the rules that define how the company undertakes its business activities. So how does it engage stakeholders? What are those rules of operating? And also, more importantly, who makes decisions and what type of decisions do they get to make? Now, a lot of the business rules come from outside the organization, so it could be inflicted on them by a regulator or by legislation or international bodies. There's many reasons and there's many rules that you need to comply to. So all of this needs to be factored into your business rules. Then it goes on to your delegation of authority, which is supposed to give direction about who in the organization is empowered, I shouldn't say gets to make, is empowered or delegated the authority to make certain decisions. So this is stemming down from the board of directors to the CEO. And then from the CEO, it's going further down to all the different other levels in the organization. An important thing on delegation of authority is it's not linked to a person, it's rather linked to a position or a role. And it gives clarity about the area of responsibility and mandate. So for example, if you work in a company and you want to know, how do I go through to recruit a person? Or who gets to decide the working conditions? The delegation of authority should guide you on that. Lastly, you need to think about all your rules and all your delegations. How do you ensure that there's compliance to these? You need to enforce it. And enforce sounds like a strong word, but it's not in this context. It should be the way you enforce it in your day-to-day operations should be very seamless. It's through your controls, which could be systems, it could be technologies, it could be processes, it could be structures, but that's how you enforce it and you ensure that people naturally follow them because that's how you operate. Just on the right-hand side or your left, I'm not sure, some few points to note is that this applies to any context. We already spoke about this, that something could be a company, it could be an organization, it could be anything. We spoke about why it's important. The main thing is to drive consistency and efficiency and make sure you protect and don't undertake unnecessary risky decisions. There's a few examples there, but wherever you look, if you have any process, any procedure, all of those are examples of a governance structure control. So we can go on to the next slide if there's no questions. Yeah, okay. Briefly on this, your controls help you to manage compliance. The main thing when you want to manage your compliance is firstly defining what compliance looks like. And it also means defining what compliance does not look like. Once you have clarity about that destination and what it looks like, then you can think about what would be adequate controls to implement. What do they look like? What should they be like? And then you need to look at the other practical considerations, like what budget do you have? What resources do you have to be able to implement adequate controls? Then you need to think about the day-to-day management. What will be involved? How do you become, how do you manage the communication, the change around all of these compliance? Do people know who to reach out to for support on compliance issues? How do you manage non-compliance? Those are all the things you talk about when you're managing it in your day-to-day. And then lastly, you need to monitor. Are you achieving your compliance goals? Do you need to revise and redefine everything? Do you need to improve? Are there new external forces that you need to consider? All of that goes into your monitoring process, and then it goes back into the cycle of define. So compliance is an ongoing activity. It happens all the time, and it's not infrequent, and it's not done by an external auditor only, or it's not done by a risk and governance function. It's continuous, it's ongoing by different parts of the business. And that brings me to the last thing I want to talk about for now, which is the lines of defense. Compliance does not sit with a risk governance and compliance function somewhere in our organization. It starts off with the business functions that are responsible for any operations, any output. They are the first line of defense to make sure that whatever's happening in the area of control is happening according to a defined process, a defined compliance and controls are in place. The second line of defense would be a risk governance and compliance function. And they are there more to really provide support, expertise, knowledge to your lines of business. And they should also be scanning the external environment to see what new threats may be coming up or what impending changes coming up that could force the company to review its current compliance and governance control structure. The third line is your internal audit. The internal audit needs to do a few things, one of which is review and audit what's currently in place in the organization. And they do that by taking samples of activities and seeing, okay, were these activities A, B, C, D done according to the approved policies or procedures? Are the systems doing what they need to do, and those sort of things? They need to pick out those deficiencies or weaknesses and give guidance on where a business needs to improve or change. They also need to provide assurance to the outside bodies in the company. So you need to provide assurance to your board audit and risk committee. They need to provide assurance to the external auditors, and they need to provide assurance to maybe an external regulator. They also play that role of interfacing with those external bodies on the company's behalf. So I'll pause there, and we can talk about if there's any questions that we want to go through right now. And then Kerrie will take us over and paint a very similar picture and how it applies in a project environment.
Nalisha, I probably missed it, but what is RGC function? What's the RGC function?
Sorry, that should be risk governance and compliance.
Okay. And A&R committee, just so we're sure.
Okay, audit and risk committee. Sorry about that. Yeah.
No, that's fine. That's fine. It's great. Okay. So this is more than just about project and program governance, isn't it? This is about any generic governance.
This is overall, any context, general overview of the concept of governance, what makes up governance, and then how it talks to compliance, and then how controls support in achieving your compliance and then overall governance goals.
Okay, all right, that's fine. For those of you in the audience who are listening, perhaps you have your own stories about compliance and controls, or you have questions. Please either unmute yourselves and ask the question, or just ask the question online on the chat. We'll give it another few seconds, Nalisha, and then you can carry on. I suggest we carry on, Nalisha.
Okay, so over to me then.
Okay.
So in case you're wondering how that all fits together, is that our corporate governance actually governs our portfolios, which in turn govern our programs and our projects. So they all actually fit together. And if we don't have the right governance coming down from on high, then it can obviously derail our business. When we're looking at the project level upwards, then we need to actually incorporate that corporate governance into the way that we work. So if I have my program manager hat on, I can actually call somebody from the audit team to come and audit my projects within my program. And that is not looking at the work being done specifically, it's actually looking at how the project manager is in fact actually managing those projects. Are they actually in line with our corporate processes, for example? We're making sure as a result that our projects and therefore our programs are actually being managed effectively. What I've got here is quite simply that two-way communication. Yeah? It's not just about the project manager reporting upwards, it's also about, from a top level down approach, communication downwards. Now I've kept this actually quite simple, and the reason why I've kept it quite simple is because at times we have organisations that don't actually work in portfolios and they don't have a more formalised or centralised project or program management function. Quite often their projects and programs will be towards the actual business unit, and the business unit has full control over what is happening. Likewise, there is quite a lot of different terminology out there, so I've incorporated both the program board and steering committees, and some organisations have project boards and steering committees which are independent of a program. As part of the program board itself, the program board's responsibility is obviously governance of the projects within the program in order to meet an outcome. Your project manager reports into a program board, and one of the questions that I'm going to first of all open up to people is ask, what is the program board? Who is part of the program board? Let's see how many people have different ideas on that. Who would like to answer? What does your program board typically look like, or your steering committee?
You should have your senior stakeholders in there.
Good.
Cool.
Senior stakeholders. Anybody else?
Yep.
So
Darren
Kaz
says,
says senior stakeholders. Dev?
and Darren says it's senior management and execs.
Yep. Steering committees, definitely.
Yep. And Rob says it's sponsors, senior suppliers, and stakeholders.
Senior suppliers, sponsor, stakeholders. Yeah, so these are all different flavours. So I also teach managing successful programs, funnily enough, and I'm also an agile program manager. Some of the few things that are actually quite key in the program board and makes it different from being a stakeholder engagement. So steering committees are typically more senior management, and they'd also typically sit above a program board. They're more like a portfolio level. Their way of working is to provide steer to that particular program. If you have a steering committee as part of your project board, then your steering committee provides steer in terms of the direction that the project needs to take. Simplified, your program board literally contains your program sponsor, your change manager or change managers, and your program manager. You then invite to that program board the executives of the individual projects and the project manager as and when necessary. How often do your program boards actually meet, or your steering committees actually meet? Anyone? Kaz?
Beginning, middle and end usually.
Beginning, middle and end. Anybody else?
We have every month as one of the answers. And my personal view is that it should be as necessary for the project to continue.
Yeah, absolutely. As necessary for the project continue. And we do quite often see, of course, that we have monthly board meetings, or indeed we could have more frequent board meetings. The important part about the program board and indeed the project board and steering committees is that they actually are a control point. Yeah, they are the ones that actually define the direction that the project or the program needs to take. And also they'll provide that information downwards that says our project needs to change direction or potentially stop altogether. You know, if your project is no longer aligned back to corporate level strategy, your business has changed direction, your project is no longer necessary, then it should be informed downwards that that is the case and the project should be stopped. So what happens when governance goes wrong? So I have a really good example for you. Now, I worked I was actually brought in as a consultant to a particular government agency in the UK. And I'm just trying to think of how long ago it was now. It's nearly 10 years ago. Time flies when you're having fun in Australia. Yeah, nearly 10 years ago when I was in the UK. This particular government agency, so they were rolling out Windows 10 as part of a program. Sorry, not Windows 10, Windows 7 10 years ago as part of a program. And the organisation at large was actually not comfortable with the way that the program was being managed. They weren't too comfortable, those key stakeholders across the organisation. Whispers got back to the corporate governance. And the corporate governance then went to the audit team and said, go and audit that program. The audit committee did their audit and failed the program as well as its projects. And the reason being was because they hadn't actually set up any governance. In fact, actually, they hadn't set up a lot of anything at all. So things weren't really going smoothly. They brought in us as consultants to fix the problem. And that was make recommendations for improvement and implement those recommendations. As part of the work that we're doing, I noticed that there was a few little things that were niggly little things that give me areas for pause and concern, because they actually had governance structures in play. They had project board, which actually looked not just at those individual projects, but it's a wider steering committee across larger projects and all the projects happening in that particular area of the organisation. They had a program board, and then on top of that, they had a governance committee. What I actually found with this particular organisation was that they're all very futuristic. They liked looking into the future. The problem is they weren't actually dealing with what was happening in the here and now. And it started with the project board level upwards. The project board actually was a weekly meeting to discuss all the projects that were happening. Unfortunately, that 3-hour-long meeting every Wednesday was not discussing the current projects. They were actually discussing futuristic projects. So there was nothing happening in terms of escalations and those pathways going upwards. The program board also had a 3-hour-long weekly meeting every Thursday, and they too discussed futuristic problems. I shouldn't say problems, they would have been. They were discussing futuristic projects and programs, things that were yet to happen. And likewise, their governance committee, 3 hours on a Friday, that discussed the exact same thing. The biggest problem of all and the biggest concern of all was that these 3 different groups, they actually contained the exact same people. And these weren't junior people, these were relatively senior people spending 9 hours of their working week discussing future projects rather than focusing on the problems in the here and now. So governance at all levels is really, really important to ensure that our projects and our programs actually remain on track. Governance itself is, of course, type of control. You're giving control. We are empowering the project manager, we are empowering the program manager to actually act on our behalf and go forward. Is there any questions so far? No? Good. Our steering board and... Sorry, Dev?
Sorry, I'm just going to say there's no questions at the moment.
Our project board and our steering committee, so the one that's on the right-hand side of the screen. Again, organisations can have that set up quite differently. It depends on your organisation. And we'll always come back to an overarching board that provides the direction, what should be stopped, what should be started, and to provide direction that needs to be taken. Some of the other common factors that I see throughout my working career and throughout the 20-odd years of program and project management is that I've actually seen people waiting for their project board or for their steering committee to actually raise problems. So that pathway of escalation, they'll wait until they actually have a project board or a steering committee to escalate something upwards, or even worse, wait for a decision to be made. Sometimes if you have that program board or that project board just once a month, that's a long time potentially to be waiting for a decision to be made. So we actually have to ensure that our pathways of escalation have in fact been set up and making sure that those decisions are being made appropriately. Your project board, again, typically try to avoid it becoming a stakeholder meeting. Now, your project board will contain your sponsor or project executive. Your project manager will be, again, as an attendee, as and when required. And of course, your senior users and your senior suppliers, or if you're in that more change management environment, again, that change manager side coming in there with your senior suppliers. Quite often we also find that project boards are, particularly if they're internal and you have external suppliers, they prefer not to have those external suppliers coming in as a project board. And just bear in mind, we do need that representation there as well. So a quick question before I move on. What are some of the project controls that we have? Our mic's on, folks.
Risk register.
Good, the risk register, very, very important project control. Anyone else?
The RAID log.
Good, the RAID log, if you happen to have an all-encompassing RAID log. So the RAID log, for people that don't know what one is, that contains pretty much your risks, your issues. It could be assumptions. My one tends to have assumptions as well as actions, dependencies, decisions. Think of it like your all-encompassing project documentation.
So Darren's saying it's a project brief and PID. Lorna says schedule. Arabia says deliverables, submission date.
Okay, so a little bit of differences of what some of the project controls are. So you're not wrong, risk and issue management, so having those registers themselves, certainly project controls. The number of management stages, when I say management stages, that is very much a Prince 2 term. Increments, if you're coming from that agile environment. Stage gates, if you are in a gated way of working. They are all project controls. It enables the board to actually maintain that authority and that control over the project and delegating that authority for the management on the day-to-day basis to the project manager. What other controls have we got there? Schedule. Okay. Now, Darren, your project brief itself doesn't actually contain any project controls, but your PID, in fact, does. Yeah, because your PID, your project initiation documentation, that actually contains the controls that you're going to use from management stages, which are things that you actually get out of your planning, so your actual plan, as opposed to the schedule itself, how you manage risks and issues, how you manage requests for change. Reports is another good one. So Nikki, great one. Those reports that you actually write, not just the exception reports, but those weekly reports or those monthly reports, they are actual project controls as well. Anybody else got anything they want to add to that one?
You touched on it with the PID. There'd be the actual changes, change requests and...
So the change request itself is not actually a control, but the way of working is in fact a control point. It enables us to control changes to scope. What about tolerances? Now, does everybody understand the terminology of tolerances?
We have acceptance criteria monitoring suggested by Deborah, and
yep.
Gantt chart milestones by Amritpal.
So Gantt chart in itself is not a control, but the actual plan itself is. Milestones, I don't like to call a milestone as a control, because milestones, how many people would like to admit that their milestones slip? Who's going to admit to that one?
Never,
Yeah,
never. They're set in stone.
they're set in stone and they never move, Kaz.
Exactly.
Yeah?
Yeah, honest.
Well, of course, if you're working in an agile environment, that would be perfectly true. So Prince 2, that has 6 tolerances: time, cost, quality. They actually sit across both your Prince 2 as well as your agile. Yeah. But in terms of agile, those things don't move. Yeah. In Prince 2, we have tolerances around those. We also have benefits, have tolerances. We have scope that has tolerances, i.e. how much are we are likely to expand in terms of our scope creep before we say that actually something is wrong. And we also have our, which ones did I say so far? Scope, risk. Did I say risk? I lost track of myself then. So we should have 6 there. We should have time, cost, quality, risks, benefit, and scope in the Prince 2 world. And when we talk about tolerances, that is a plus or minus. So when we do our estimating, we would actually have a plus or minus on our time and our cost regarding our actual plan itself. The actual tolerance itself is in fact a project control. And that is talking about managed by exception. At which point do we actually need to escalate it upwards, and who do we need to escalate it upwards in order for our project to be maintained in the right direction, or there needs to be some formal management intervention done. Anybody got any questions on that part so far? Of course, in your agile world, it's a little bit more lenient. When I say it's a little bit more lenient, yeah, time, cost, and quality in the agile world is sacrosanct, which means scope is actually driven by the requirements, and we set the scope in terms of the requirements, the breadth, that is the scope, that we allow the variations to come in the depth, which means that we'll always guarantee that we'll deliver on time. We'll always guarantee that we'll deliver within the cost. When it comes down to quality on both sides, so you actually mentioned quite correctly, acceptance criteria. If we're doing our acceptance criteria effectively, yeah, we're setting the acceptance, how we're going to accept that the project has delivered everything that it needs to deliver to the specified quality. We need to set it from the outset. Yeah, so right at the very start, and that is something that actually does go into the project brief, and it gets expanded on as part of the PID. Questions so far? Everyone still keeping up? Good.
Must be too early in the day for us. It's and too late in the day for you guys.
Well, we have to do this, don't we? It's not too early in the day. It must be, what, 10 o'clock in the morning for you guys? Okay, so our project controls, management stages or stage gates, those increments that we're actually using. How far into the future is it foreseeable to actually plan? Now we break down to the work into management size chunks. The number of management stages, so something that is more known. So we've done something similar before. We can't say that it's exactly the same because each and every project is unique in some way. If our management stages are of a longer duration, it means that there is more confidence in the work that's being done, so there is less control over the project. If it is something that is newer and we're less comfortable with it, then we can anticipate that the number of management stages are going to be more and the duration of each stage will be shorter. That enables the project board or the program board to actually change direction given the information that they know at the time. The reporting time frame, so how often the project manager needs to report to the project board, and again, how often those team leads need to report to the project manager. So quite often the project manager will create their report. Yeah, it's quite often I see it, they're not actually talking to the people that are leading the teams about the work that is being done. They make assumptions in the report themselves. our risk and our issue management, our change control management, and of course that managed by exception. The other part of project controls, which actually dovetails specifically into managed by exception, is who the authority actually is. Who do we need to escalate to? Do we escalate everything to the project board? Anyone?
No, not necessarily. If it's within a team, so you've got a resource issue within the team, you'd go to a team leader.
Yep, potentially. You're not wrong there, Kaz, actually. We do have roles and responsibilities, and part of those roles and responsibilities is that delegated authority. So that delegated authority in terms of escalation, what needs to be escalated, when it needs to be escalated, and who it needs to be escalated to. If it's anything to do with a tolerance, typically they will always go to the project board or project board members to be resolved. We're not just sending an exception report to the board though, we actually need to have those recommendations there of the action that we want them to take. And of course, we're not waiting for a particular board meeting to happen. If there is a tolerance that is expected to actually be exceeded, then we need a decision about what needs to be done to be taken straight away. Waiting 4 weeks potentially is not actually a good thing, because we've automatically lost control of our project. What are the typical pathways for escalation? Who do you escalate to? Come on, Kaz, who do you normally escalate to from the project level upwards?
Well, you'd have your actual project, you take it up to your project board initially, or if you're in the program situation, you'd take it to a program manager.
Good, and how do you do that?
Pick up the phone.
Pick up the phone, yeah? Picking up the phone, talking to somebody directly or indeed face-to-face is the best way to actually get that attention in the here and now. Yeah? And some of the things that I've actually seen in the past, again, from seasoned project managers, they've put a decision into what they call their steerco pack, and then they've come to me and said, my steerco didn't make a decision. And when I've looked at it, I said, well, I can't see where you're asking them to make a decision. And why on earth is it in the steerco pack in the first place? It shouldn't be there. The decisions that have been made can in fact be in a steerco pack, but not actually asking for a decision itself. Now, I just had a quick question come up there. So, Dewan, absolutely. You're quite right. It should be part of the communication management plan or your communication strategy. However, it's not always in there. Your communication plan and your communication strategy should actually be looking more towards your stakeholder engagement. And you're not wrong, your project board is part of that stakeholder engagement. But all of your risk strategies, your change control strategy, your issue management strategy should also contain who those escalation pathways are. Now, what goes into a project report? This is the last slide, by the way. Like I said, I was going to keep it nice and short because people keep on telling me I talk too much. Now, I've kept this at a very high level, and I've done so deliberately to open up the Q&A part. So obviously what goes into a project report, the project name, if it has a number, unique identifier, and the date of the report. Now, if you're a program manager and you want to catch out project managers not doing things, just look for the date. Yeah, I have actually had somebody send me a project report that was not only out of date, it was out of date by a considerable period of time. They hadn't even bothered to update the information in it. Yeah, these are all things to try and avoid. The report period. Now, for me personally, there are two things that I actually like to see. Progress for this period and the plan for next period. I also like to see our cash flow or our project financials. And if you happen to be a whiz-bang person at something like Excel, or even better, having something like Power BI that does it for you in the background, or any other framework that is used by your organization, visuals are great, yeah, because then I can actually see at a glance what is going on. What other information might you actually have in there? And Deborah, I'm going to pull you up on that one, on that chat there. Okay. So why would we not send an email? I mean, I'm not saying you're wrong about sending an email. However, what's the problem with email, folks? Come on,
Nobody
Deborah.
reads it.
Nobody
Well,
reads it. Come on, Deborah.
Yeah. So hence exactly, I'd send it so the facts are in front of the face, then ring them and talk them through the email. So it wouldn't be, I wouldn't send an email and wait for a response. I'd follow it straight away with a phone call.
Excellent, because I know that there are people that do actually rely heavily on an email. Yeah, plonk it on an email and everything will be fine.
People don't read emails, do they? Or they don't read, they skim it and move on to the next one, don't they? So.
Indeed. And just bear in mind is that the people that you are escalating it to quite typically are senior level management. It could be days before they've even registered the fact that you have sent an email to them. Yeah. These are the kind of
they're
problems.
Quite honest about saying as well that they don't read the emails, aren't they? So.
Now that's an interesting discussion, that one, Deborah.
Well, in my experience, yeah, they admit it.
So you can have major milestones, but as we said earlier, major milestones, they're great. Yeah. How long apart are those major milestones? Anyone?
They can be months, can't they?
They can be months apart, which is why it is not something that I would typically have in a project report. It is certainly something that I might use as project performance at the end of the project to see how far we have actually slipped those major milestones. But the major activities or the outcomes that we have planned, that is something that we can manage in the here and now. You know, we can keep a track on that. We can plan, we can say what it was that we planned. We can have a forecast, because obviously a plan is an estimate. Even a forecast is an estimate. And then we can state when it was that we actually achieved it. Likewise, for the next period, I actually want to see that there is in fact progress. Where are we going to? Are we heading in the right direction? You know, it enables us to plan and forecast, and again, give us those actuals in that next period as well. So thinking about what goes into your project reports, what else might you have in there?
Would you put
RAG status?
I'd say, would you put resource availability?
Okay, resource availability. So who says yes and who says no?
I'd say yes if you needed some more.
Yes, if I needed some more. Now, if I needed some more resource, am I going to put it in a project report?
No, I suppose not.
No.
Because of an escalation, wouldn't it?
That would be an escalation. And again, it's something that comes with managing by stages. It is in fact making sure, of course, that those resources that we need for that next particular phase are in fact available to us. And if there are issues with resources, then that actually needs to be escalated up to the board immediately. Nish, you have got our RAG status, red, amber, green. Why is that important?
I'm just talking from experience, because I think when I ran projects, my sponsor wanted to see whether we're on the right track or if you're deviating.
Yep, red, amber, green. Perfect. It's nice to have it at the top at a glance to see what's happening. Yeah, at a glance, red, amber, green. And when we've used those in the past, we'll typically have that timescale and cost of the two red, amber, greens. If our project is green, means that there is no problem. But if we have a red or an amber, then obviously risks and issues are coming into play. So what do we want from risk and issues niche?
Anything that needs to be highlighted or escalated to that level. So not day-to-day. So not day-to-day risks and issues, but anything that needs to be escalated.
So if we are escalating major risks and issues, what is the problem with waiting with the progress report?
It's not so much waiting, but it's just highlighting. So obviously you've discussed it during the last few weeks anyway, but as part of the report, you're just highlighting that these issues are still there, and what are you doing to mitigate it?
Good, that's what we're looking for specifically. If we do have things that have been escalated upwards in terms of risks and issues, the risk and issue itself, that's not the important information. It's what you're doing about it that is in fact important. Now, that's the additional information that we really want to see on our progress reports. So Tinu, progress not made from the last report. Explain to me what you mean there, Tinu.
Okay, so I've seen some reports where you have progress expected for this period, progress not made from the last period, and forecast progress. So I've seen reports like that, and so you've reported that you're going to make this progress, but then you come to the next meeting and you haven't made that progress, and so you report on that and you say why that progress hasn't been made and any issues with that. Sorry for the background noise. Apologies.
No, that's quite all right. So whenever we have these kind of issues where we haven't actually progressed, then again, we should have some sort of log that goes with that, either in terms of our RAID log, or more specifically, progress that we have planned to do, but we haven't actually progressed at all. That would be something that would go into the issue register. What is the problem? Why have we not progressed? And what is it that we're doing about it? So even in terms of our risks and issues, they should be focused on the actual progress at this point in time. Okay, we don't need to really look at the major risks and issues. We want to see what is impacting us in the here and now. Big things coming forward in the future. So there was a, Dev, you'll have to remind me of when the risk and issue session was.
It was last week, wasn't it? On Tuesday, Wednesday, something like that. You're asking me a question on the fly, Kerrie. Come on.
Sorry, guys. Risk and issues is tomorrow.
Okay, so risks and issues is tomorrow. Thank you, Victor.
Thanks, Victor.
We just want to make sure we realize it's in the future, not in the past. Thanks.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
So in terms of our risks and issues, so what we're focusing there. Now, when we're thinking about risks themselves, our top 3 risks, more importantly, those risks that are likely to impact us in the near future. It'd be pointless sending a red risk to your project board as part of your project report, because a risk is an uncertainty. It may or may not happen. But if it's not due to happen for 6 months, there is no point having it on a report for next week. So the information that we want to see is actually all about timely information, enabling the board to actually keep and maintain that control over the project, as well as give that decision, that communications downwards. Now, Deborah, another good one that you've got there as well. Report on the percentage of progress. Now, this is something that a visual progress is great. And we're talking about potentially a burn up chart or a burn down chart. And what that actually does, it gives you that visualization of whether it's likely to be achievable. So are we actually still heading in the right direction? Is it actually achievable? Now, of course, when you're using charts like a burn up chart or a burn down chart, there is a little bit of a knack to it. And that would be a completely different subject matter for the night. Now, Dewan. So successful for project within scope, Dewan.
Hello, Kerrie. Yes.
Hey, Dewan.
Hi, Kerrie.
So what do you mean about successful for the project within scope? What exactly are you talking about there?
Yeah, what I mean is that if you agreed some scope to be implemented, so you have to be watched continuously so that the project is not slipping the date. Otherwise, it become an uncertainties, what you just mentioned, and to watch it and take appropriate action on that to
Good.
bring
So that's all.
the project date on track again.
Yep. So again, that comes back to your risk and issue management. What I was hoping, Dewan, that you're actually going to say there would be change requests. Yeah, the number of change requests that we've had. It's also very useful information that we quite often like to see on our project report, the number of change requests that have come in. Because again, your project manager is typically going to be given some authority to actually agree to change requests. Yeah, that's one of those areas of tolerance. We do an impact assessment and we decide whether it will actually fit within our project or whether it will be outside of the scope of our project, and if necessarily, escalate that particular change request going upwards, so a change in scope itself. Why might we have change requests on our project report?
I mentioned about the budget, how much money you are going to use for it, for the uncertainties, including.
Yep. So something that comes into scope, it's a new change request, a request that's come in. And of course, part of that impact assessment is then going to be how much money is that actually going to cost us? Because if we are working within our budgets and our tolerances, that change request might put us outside of that tolerance, in which case that needs to be escalated. What else? Why else might we need that information on our project report in terms of the number of requests for scope, change requests for scope?
It highlights that requirements weren't necessarily captured correctly at the beginning.
Good. That's exactly what we want. Those requirements might not have been captured properly in the beginning. Yeah. Nothing worse than delivering a new finance system, for example, that can't actually do reporting and not knowing about it until you get to your financial year end. That one's a true example, by the way. Yeah. Wasn't actually noticed that this new system couldn't actually do reporting, and it caused a lot of problems to the organization that was implementing it. What else?
You may need different resources to the ones that you've already got. You may need different skills depending on the scope of the CR.
Good. Yep, that's another good reason. That will come as part of that impact assessment. Yeah, so these are all important pieces of information. It enables the board to actually make a formal decision. It could be that that CR might in fact derail our project altogether. Now, we might unwittingly incorporate something that actually takes our project out of alignment. What about continuous improvement? So what might we include on our project report that would constitute continuous improvement?
Maybe opportunities that you've spotted during the course of the project that would don't know where I'm going with that.
Opportunities. Now again, so Victor is taking note of all of this because I think, Victor, you're actually one of the leads for the risk, aren't you?
Yes, I am. Yes, I am.
Yeah.
Okay,
So,
I think we can accommodate opportunities because we learn lessons. We do pick up opportunities as well. So that's not a bad one. Yeah.
yep. So, Duran, you've got it absolutely correct. Lessons learnt. What have we learnt this week? Now, because we want to incorporate that into our continuous improvement and feed that into the next period. It might be that we need to change ways of working in order to facilitate better improvements. Well, that was wrong saying better improvements. What bad grammar I have tonight. Yeah. So incorporating lessons learned to create those improvements, improve the way that we actually work. Make sure that we are avoiding pitfalls potentially. Now, there's also a downside to lessons learned as well, because sometimes we don't actually want the teams working in a different way in that particular stage of the life cycle. We might actually need to wait until the next management stage to incorporate those lessons learned, because it could be that it might be a significant shift in the way of working that will actually cause more problems than it will resolve.
Kerrie, I have a question on that.
Yep.
What you mean in lessons learned, CSI? I think that is more the client need to be have to pay for that money for the CSI point of view. I think that is more the operations part, the suppliers part, to bring the changes, right? The improvements.
Yeah, so there could be those kind of improvements, but be careful though, Dewan, is that those lessons learned improvements, when we're talking about supply side, is not actually changes of scope. So sometimes there could be a crossover of change of scope. Here we're talking about actual improvements, doing things differently. We're talking about what we did well and what we didn't do well. So we want to keep doing what we've done well, but we actually want to improve on the things that didn't go well. So those are the lessons learned that we're talking about. If we've seen pitfall,
yeah, but who should pay that money for that piece of?
So when we're doing lessons learned, it's a continuous process, and you're not wrong, Dewan, is that sometimes that will be something that needs to be escalated upwards, and potentially it could create different ways of working in a wider environment than the project itself. But when we're thinking about incorporating ways of working into our actual project, it's looking internally at us. What is it we can do better? How can we actually improve things? It could be that that might be internal relations, so relations with our actual suppliers, how we can communicate better. Has anyone actually got anything else that they might think of in terms of lessons learned?
It wasn't so much lessons learned for me. Oh, sorry, I beg your pardon. Who did I talk over there?
It's okay, carry on.
It's the going back to the changes. You might have de-scoped something out of the project, and you want it recorded.
Good. That would certainly go through a change request as well if you de-scope something. Deborah, what about you?
I was just around the lessons learned. So in the projects I've dealt with, and they don't even happen half the time until after the project's finished. And then, because people are moving on, they just pay lip service to it. So I think that it's really important that we start really trying to get this in right at the beginning. Maybe even as part of the PID to say, we need to do lessons learned throughout the project.
Good. Yep, that's part of that communication. Now, Nish, you've actually said something that's very important there. So much information on one page. So who's going to actually drive what's in your project reports? Who's going to drive the content?
The project board, the people who you're presenting the report to.
The project is not who you're presenting the report to, but you're not wrong though. It is the project board that tells you what it is that they want in a report. Yeah? It might not just be one page long. Where are they getting driven from? So your project board will tell you what they want in terms of the report. Where are they being told? They're also being told that they need something very specific. Where does that information come from?
Corporate governance.
That's it exactly. It's actually coming down from corporate governance. We need to provide our board with the information they need to provide upwards to that corporate governance. Yeah, so if we're not getting it right and our board's not getting it right, then we can guarantee that the corporate governance is not getting it right either. And quite often this is where we start seeing things coming really from out of the ballpark with problems. Now, we don't know what's going on because our reporting from the bottom level upwards hasn't been all that effective. Now, even though we looked at those project reports, this could be weekly, this could be monthly. Just bear in mind as well is that you're collecting information. Who are you collecting information from? Yeah, you're collecting information from those team leads. Yeah, they're reporting to you. They're sending their progress reports to you, which means you actually have to tell them what your needs are. So who would like to hold their hand up and say they're getting the right information from their supply side? Anyone? No, everybody's getting all the information that they need from their supply side. Why are you getting the right information that you need from your supply side?
Because you've agreed it up front.
Good, because you've agreed it up front. Yeah, and every single time we start a new management stage, so with those work orders that you're sending to suppliers, you know, your scope of works, your work packages, yeah, those things that you are sending to your suppliers should also contain your requirements for how they need to report progress to you. So, crunch point for people that work with agile teams. Okay, so for example, a Scrum team, how are you going to get that report? Nobody game there.
As a
Okay.
designated person that's their role to report up to you with timescales and requirements.
Yeah, it's funny that they don't have one of those.
Oh, right, okay. Not done a lot of agile.
So if you're working with agile teams, yeah, and you want to report, then it means that you physically have to be there to get one, which is great if you happen to be in the same room as them. If not, the way to actually work with agile teams to enable you to do your accurate reporting is ask them to send you a snapshot, a photograph on the iPhone or Android phone. Ask them to actually send you a picture of their team board, because they actually do progress reporting every single day. So Modub has actually said time boxing with the daily stand-up. Your agile teams will actually do a daily stand-up. They actually report progress every single day. So you actually stand in better stead on a daily basis with your agile teams of progress being made. You'll also be aware a lot faster if there's an actual problem. Now, has anybody got any questions? So we're going to open up the floor to Q&A.
Hi, Kerrie.
Victor, you're asking me a question, Victor. It's unusual.
So I am. You should know you wouldn't get away with one from me. Okay. Nalisha and yourself have articulated quite brilliantly what governance is about, the need for these controls to be in place. Here is what I'd like the group to please share with us. You see, a lot of the time, the problem is not really with the PMs or the program managers, because they get themselves educated on these things. You just need to look at the sample audience we have. They get themselves on courses, they learn about best practice. A lot of the challenges come because the senior stakeholders sitting on their stakeholders on the project boards haven't got a clue. So what are the challenges and the sort of techniques we can use to get these people up to speed? A lot of them are going to tell you they're too busy, to step aside and, attend a course or whatever. And we can understand that to some extent. They're sitting on 3, 4, 5, 7 stakeholders, and that's not even their day job. But it means but they still need to be educated. So what are the sort of techniques people have used, and how effective have those techniques been?
I know I can answer that, but first of all, has anybody got any specific techniques of how they actually would approach that particular problem?
So this step, I was governed projects for IT, and making sure that IT service were covered. And the only way I could get what I need was to push my way in at the front, because the tendency is acceptances at the end go away. So I used to have to be really strong about, no, I need to be there at the initial kickoff meeting, talk about what my requirements are and understand how I can help you, set up regular meetings. And then what I also created was almost a tick list, really, that I would meet with the project manager on a regular basis just to say, right, are these things in place? And just keep him on track. And also, I used to have to do a bit of coaching and mentoring on what service needed, because, again, just in my experience, and I'm not generalising, they didn't really understand service. They just thought it was something that tagged on at the end.
Oh, we see that far too often, Deborah, with IT projects. IT projects, there's two sides to every coin, obviously. IT projects forget about the business, and the business forget about IT, one way or the other. And of course, everybody forgets about IT support and who's going to support it afterwards. The corporate function, they need to be included in all of our projects to say, what is the impact on IT? What we're talking about here is, we're talking about, Deborah, you said the right words, mentoring and coaching. Quite often, your project board, quite simply, don't have a clue. They're not necessarily going to be a program director or a program executive that is extremely well trained and has worked in projects and programs throughout their entire existence. They're in their corporate environment, their career. Quite often, when it comes down to projects, they have no idea. So they are 100% reliant on what goes into your project initiation documentation. If you're working in a PMP environment, they're going to be looking very specifically at your project charter. If you're working in an agile environment like Agile PM, they're going to be looking very specifically at your management approach definition, because all of those will contain how you're going to control your project, what those project controls are, how you're going to manage the project, what is the procedures that you need to use, what tools do you need to use, when do you need to report, and what, of course, goes into those reports. And, of course, you then need to coach and mentor them, because they don't necessarily have a clue. If they are not sure, if they are not confident in you as a project manager, then they can get that lovely role called project assurance. They can get Nalisha to come in and audit you. Or even worse, they could get me to come in and audit you. And they will actually audit what you have very specifically in your project controls, in your PIDs. But they're not just going to audit and say, are you actually doing what you said you're going to be doing in your PID? They're actually going to be looking at your PID and saying, are you actually working in alignment with that corporate level governance? Are you doing what the book says you should be doing, how you should be doing it? So that is in fact a project assurance role. And if it's coming from the program into a project, it's a quality assurance. It's talking about process, the quality of the processes that you are in fact following. Okay?
Yeah, just one of the other things, I said I had a tick list.
Yep, carry on.
I wouldn't just ask if they had it, I'd want to see evidence as well.
Absolutely,
So
that would be the auditor.
So it was a bit of both really at the same time.
Yep, that's the auditor. What about organisations that have thousands of projects running at any particular point in time? How do you think they monitor all of those thousands of projects? They have somebody which is an audit type role that actually collates all of this information together, puts it in a singular report. And this is where that RAG status comes into play again. Yeah? Because in that singular report, the ones at the top, all those projects and programs at the top are the ones that are all red. And then you are quarterly invited to come along and explain yourself to very senior management about what it is that you're doing to get that project or program back on track. The content of your project reports, that status reporting, is going to vary from organisation to organisation, which means you need to have a conversation with your project executives or your project sponsor or indeed your program sponsor. Now you need to have that conversation with them to say, what is it that you actually need to see? And this is actually why I kept this quite light, is because it's different for different organisations. Yeah, sometimes this could be very simple and very light. They might just want to see a cost-benefit analysis report. Any other questions? So Nalisha, is there anything that you want to add in?
Hi, thanks, Kerrie. Really like the way you've explained everything and brought in place some real practical examples and tried to tie it into how this fits into looking at it from a company perspective and down to the project perspective. I think what's common across is the common message that all of this is done for two main reasons. The first being that you want to manage risk, and more specifically, the consequence of negative risk and negative risky decision making. And the other one is that we want to drive efficiency, and we want to drive consistency and having a repeatable way of doing things to make sure that we are able to manage efficiency across from the top of the organization right down to all different levels. So that's the main thing for me when we talk about governance, is that it's there for two main purposes: managing your risk and managing your efficiency.
Now, does anybody have any questions for Nalisha at all? Or any other general questions? Is that Deborah then?
Yeah, I was just going to say, Kerrie, you and Nalisha have covered this both really well. We've had a few people who've dropped out because we've obviously run over the hour. But thank you very much for your presentation, and everyone, thank you for attending. I hope you found it useful, and please don't forget to leave some feedback. And as Victor said earlier on, we do have a few more sessions coming later on for the next couple of days. So please come back and join us then. On that note, I think we might as well end the session.